It really is such a great drone. Hi everyone, thanks for stopping by the channel today. So a lot of you probably did a lot of research, you watched a lot of videos, watched some tutorials perhaps, and you finally made the decision to buy your first drone, the Mavic Air 2. And now one of the most important things that you need to learn is how to fly it without actually crashing it. A couple of years ago, I did some videos called Quick Tips for Your Mavic Pro, and they did quite well. They were probably some of my most popular videos and probably built my channel, because the reason that people liked them so much is because they were quick, they got to the point, and they provided some tips that help people get to flying and tips that they could take out and use right away. And so I'm gonna start doing those again with the Mavic Air 2, because more than likely, a lot of you that have this drone, this is your first drone, and there's a lot that you need to learn. And so today I have just 3 tips that I wanna share with you that will hopefully improve the enjoyment level when you learn how to fly your Mavic Air 2. Hey, welcome back to the channel everyone, Russ here. In case you happen to be new, I make videos here about drones and other related technology, so browse the channel after you're done watching this video, and if you find something of value and you want to see more videos like this one, go ahead and click on that subscribe button to join the community. I would love to have you join us. Now, in case you don't know what my quick tips videos are, I think the name pretty much explains it, but what I try to do is I try to show you just a few things that maybe you don't know about your new drone or about flying drones in general. And especially if you're just getting started, there's so much to learn. So with these videos, it's my hope, my ultimate goal, that you pick up just a few things that increase the enjoyment level of your hobby. And more importantly, I try to keep these videos short and to the point. So speaking of that, let's quit talking and get right to the tips. So tip number 1 today has to do with getting used to maneuvering your drone. One of the most important things that you should become skilled at is learning how to fly your drone while it's facing you. And the reason behind that is because there are many times that when you're flying, it's going to be important to understand that the controls are reversed. When the drone is facing you, for instance, if you push the stick to the right, the drone is going to go to the left and vice versa. And when you push the stick forward, it's going to come towards you rather than go away from you. Now, this is especially important to remember if you're in a situation where maybe the battery's running low and you're trying to get that drone back to the ground safely and you don't want to land it in a precarious situation. Maybe there's some obstacles around and you might be in a hurry. And if you aren't comfortable steering the drone as it faces you, then you risk crashing it. So what I suggest to do is find a nice wide open space and position the drone about 50 to 100 feet away from you and face it towards you, and then just get used to flying it. Fly the drone using all the different directions. And this sounds like it should be really easy, but it actually isn't. It was one of the hardest things for me to learn as I was first learning how to fly a drone. So I recommend taking at least 2 batteries, maybe 3 batteries to learn how to fly your drone as it's facing you. You'll feel so much more comfortable when you bring it back home. Tip number 2 for today has to do with the return to home height setting. This is in the safety menu, and it's the altitude at which you want the drone to return to home if you hit that button or if it loses signal and comes back automatically. Now, you should always be familiar with the environment that you're going to be flying in, and you should always take note of the highest obstacle that's between you and the drone. For instance, I know that this tree where I fly sometimes is just under 100 feet tall, and it's the tallest tree around. So what I do is I set my return to home height to 120 feet, and that way I don't ever have to worry about it hitting that tree should it happen to come home by itself. Now, this is something that you should do every time you fly. It should be part of your pre-flight routine, even if you're flying in the same spot all the time, because if you make it a habit, then you won't forget to do it if you travel to a new location with higher obstacles than you may be used to. Now, some people ask, well, what about the obstacle avoidance? Won't the drone, automatically stop if it comes up to that tree? Well, yes, if you are in normal mode. But if you're in sport mode, and I like to fly in sport mode, and you should be flying in sport mode if you're in the Mavic Air 2 because it is so fun. But if you're flying in sport mode and the drone decides to come home by itself because it loses connection, it's not gonna have obstacle avoidance. So it's really important to make sure that you know what the highest obstacle is and set your return to home height above that. Now, another common question that I hear often is, what if you are flying above that altitude? What if you set your return to home to 120 feet and you're flying at 150 feet and it returns to home? Is it gonna go down to that 120 feet and then come home? No, if your drone is above the return to home height, it's gonna stay at that height and come home. It's not gonna lower down before it comes, because you don't want it to, go down into a canopy of trees or go down and hit a building or something like that. So you don't have to worry about that. If you're flying above that return to home height, it's just gonna come home at that height. Now, before I get to tip number 3, there is a video that I wanna direct you to that is very valuable. It's gonna teach you a lot about the camera settings on your Mavic Air 2, and it's from my friend Mike from Drone Supremacy. He just posted this video. It's a very valuable video. I'm gonna put it down in the description. I'll put a link there. Also, I'll just put it right up here if you wanna go ahead and click on that. And he talks about the difference between 12 megapixel and 48 megapixels. He also talks about decentilike and what it means for you. And so there's a lot of valuable information in that video. So go ahead and watch that when you're done watching this. Mike puts out a lot of valuable videos just like mine, and so I think you might appreciate them. Check him out and subscribe also to his channel. He has some great stuff. Now, speaking about getting the best looking video footage that you can, that is tip number 3 today. One of the things that you should purchase early on for your Mavic Air 2, one of the most important, is ND filters. And the reason for that is that the Mavic Air 2 has a fixed aperture. And this means that you can't dial in the best settings for cinematic aerial footage like you can with a Mavic 2 Pro without using ND filters. They are hands down the #1 thing that will instantly improve the video footage coming from the Mavic Air 2. Now, I'm not gonna do a complete tutorial on them because I have done some already, and there are so many out there right now. There's almost an overload of tutorials on why you use ND filters. But if you haven't watched mine, go ahead and watch this right here. I made this a couple years ago, and it gives you the basics of why we need to use ND filters. I will tell you that 75% of the time I'm using an ND8 with polarizer on my Mavic Air 2 when I'm shooting 4K at 60. Now, I have used the ND16 a couple of times, but that's when I was flying over water, so it was a lot brighter there. But for the most part, I'm using an ND8. Also, I do want to mention that the ND filters that come with the Fly More combo kit, if you got that, you get 3 ND filters from DJI, and they do the job, but they really are budget filters. They are not built very well. They're not for the long term. I think they're just to get you started, to help you understand how ND filters work. If you want to get some filters that are going to last for the long term and you're going to be able to use them 2-3 years from now, I recommend getting some aftermarket ND filters. All right, apparently I'm supposed to do the rest of this video from inside, having the neighbor mowing the lawn outside, 2 airplanes flying overhead, construction across the road with the backup beepers, 2 trains going by, and the birds thinking it's time to sing. I decided to just come inside and finish this. So when it comes to ND filters for the Mavic Air 2, there are some already out. 2 of the more established brands are Freewell Gear and PGY Tech, and I have both here. I have the all-day 8-pack from Freewell, and then I have the 4-pack polarized ND filters from PGY Tech. Both really good brands. They've been around for a while. They know what they're doing. Both high-quality aluminum, scratch-proof, oil-proof, waterproof, everything proof. Really good warranties on either of them, so they're both built really well. But one set is just a little bit better than the other, and I'll tell you about that in just a second. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to do a tutorial on ND filters, but I'm going to tell you how I do it. What I do is I put the drone up, I turn on my histogram and my overexposure warning so I know what the proper exposure should be. So without an ND filter, put the drone up and I see what the settings should be to get that cinematic rule, which is twice that of your frame rate. So if I'm shooting 4K 60, I want my shutter speed to be 1/120. Now, because we don't have an aperture, the best way to adjust your exposure on the Mavic Air 2 is with ND filters. Like I said, you need them to make your footage look great. And so I put the drone up the other day and got it the overexposure set and the histogram set, and I set the shutter speed to 1/1000 to get the proper exposure. So what that tells me is I need to lower the exposure by 3 stops. Now, how do you figure that out? Well, what you do is you divide the shutter speed in half, and however many times you divide it in half, that's how many stops you need to reduce the light by. So 1000 in half is 500, 500 in half is 250, and then 250 in half is 120. It's actually 125, but as close as you're going to get on the camera is 1/120. So that tells me I need a 3-stop reduction in light to get a shutter speed of 1/120. So that's an ND8. An ND4 is 2 stops, ND8 is 3 stops, ND16 is 4 stops, and so on. So like I said, most of the time I'm using an ND8 and sometimes an ND16. So I put on the Freewell ND8 filter, and that got me the perfect exposure. That got the shutter speed of 1/120, the ISO of 100, and it shows the meter shows 0.0, and that's what you want. Sometimes you can be negative 0.3, that's okay. Sometimes plus 0.3 is okay, but you want that meter to show 0.0 as often as possible. The histogram was well balanced, and the overexposure warning showed hardly any zebra lines at all. So I know the ND8 on the Freewell is perfect. It's set perfect. But then what I did is I put the PGY Tech filter on, and the same one, the ND8 from PGY Tech, and you can see right off the bat that it is quite a bit darker. It's actually almost one stop darker. So to get the proper exposure with the PGY Tech ND8, I had to actually put the shutter speed to 1/60. Now 4K at 60 is what I'm recording at. 1/60 shutter speed is not ideal. That's not going to give you the 180-degree shutter rule, which is the cinematic footage rule. You know, rules are meant to be broken. It's okay if you're not every time doing it perfectly, but you don't want to have that 1-to-1 ratio. And so the PGY Tech are just a little bit too dark. They're not as accurately tuned as the Freewell filters. And so a little bit of work to do there. Still high quality filter, but just know that if you got the PGY Tech, or if you're going to get the PGY Tech, you can still use them. Still great filters, still going to last. But you're going to have to adjust your shutter speed down a little bit to let more light in, or you're going to have to turn up your ISO from 100 to maybe 200 or even 400. Probably not, but you could probably get by with 200, which isn't going to add too much extra noise into your image, but the ideal is to have an ISO of 100. So that's the two filter sets that I have. Also, I should mention, I do use a polarizer filter all the time, and that's because there are often times where I'm flying where there's reflections. You know, automobiles reflect windshields. I fly over the lake sometimes, and you're going to get that reflection off of the lake. And then also they just make the footage look a little more rich. You know, it deepens the blues, deepens the greens. And so if you're looking to get an ND filter, get the ones that have the polarizer on them as well. And you can adjust that polarizing effect to whatever taste you like. You can make it more saturated or less saturated, totally up to you. So I'll have links in the description for both sets of these filters if you're interested in getting them for yourself. Like I said, they are probably the most important thing that you can purchase for your Mavic Air 2 if you want to get the footage that looks like the professionals. So anyway, there is the first video for the Mavic Air 2 quick tips. Hopefully you guys got some value out of it. If you did, click on the thumbs up button. You can certainly click on the thumbs down button, but it's a lot more fun to click on the thumbs up button, but I appreciate it. Also, if you're not subscribed, be sure you click on the subscribe button to join the community. I want to thank you so much for watching today. Have a great day, and as always, fly safe and fly smart. Now, you don't want it to land automatically in kind of a precarious position. Get them. Now, before we get to tip number 3, I'd like to direct you to a video that I think you're going to find a lot of value in. It's from my friend Mike over at Drone Supremacy. Now, before we get to tip number 3, there's a video I'd like to direct you to that I think you're going to find a lot of value in. It's from my friend Mike over at Drone Supremacy. Drone Supremacy. Oh, that's so hard to say. Drone Supremacy, okay. So before we get to tip number 3, I'd like to tell you about a video I think you're going to find value in. It's from my friend Mike over at Drone Supremacy. All right, I'm starting over. Some days the words just don't come.